My name is Eliza Hartley. I'm a 37-year-old AI engineer who prefers the quiet hum of servers to the cacophony of office politics. I've spent 15 years building systems that can think, learn, and adapt qualities that, ironically, many executives lack. People often mistake my reserved nature for weakness. They rarely notice that while I'm saying little, I'm observing everything. I sat in the third row of Grantham Logic's quarterly all-hands meeting, nursing my thermos of green tea as Victor Lane strutted across the stage. 6 months as CEO, and he'd already mastered the Silicon Valley uniform designer jeans, crisp button-down, and that particular brand of rehearsed casualness that signals, I'm approachable, but also worth $30 million. Today, Victor announced, his voice carrying the practiced cadence of someone who'd spent the morning practicing in front of a mirror. I'm thrilled to unveil what will revolutionize the entire supply chain industry. The massive screen behind him flashed with a familiar architectural diagram, my architectural diagram, the one I'd spent 18 months perfecting, the one I'd coded alone during countless late nights, the one that had occupied my dreams and nightmares equally. We call it OmniChain, Victor continued, clicking through slides that displayed my work, stripped of my name but unmistakably mine. A neural network system that doesn't just predict supply chain disruptions, but actively reorients and optimizes in real time. My fingers tightened around my thermos. Each slide felt like watching someone parade around in clothes stolen from my closet, claiming they'd made them themselves. The distributed learning nodes, the adaptive feedback mechanisms, the proprietary latency reduction system, all mine, presented under the Grantham Logic banner without a single mention of their creator. Sarah Chen, our product manager, leaned toward me. "That's your system," she whispered. "Why aren't they crediting you?" I gave a barely perceptible shrug. Good question. The investors in the front row were practically salivating. One raised his hand during Q&A. "This is remarkable technology. Who led the development team?" Victor's smile didn't waver. OmniChain represents Grantham's collaborative excellence. We have brilliant minds working together across departments. His gaze swept the room, carefully avoiding the section where I sat. A true team achievement. I felt a cold recognition settle in my stomach. This wasn't an oversight. This was deliberate. After the meeting, while others gathered around Victor like moths to a flame, I returned to my desk and opened my personal laptop, never the company machine. I navigated to a private repository and checked the timestamp on a folder labeled Cairo Dynamics LLC, 6 months old, predating Victor's arrival. I'd seen enough corporate politics to know when the winds were shifting, when the new CEO had started asking oddly specific questions about my project architecture last month. I'd felt that familiar prickle at the back of my neck, the same sensation that had saved me twice before in my career. So I'd taken precautions, quietly filing patents under my LLC, documenting my work process, and creating development logs with cryptographic timestamps. Call it paranoia, I call it experience. Over the next 3 weeks, the pattern became unmistakable. First, I was accidentally left off key email threads. Then my access to the main repository was temporarily restricted during security updates. My name disappeared from internal documentation. Meeting invitations stopped arriving. I said nothing, did nothing, just kept coming to work, kept drinking my tea, kept making minor, innocuous contributions while working on something far more significant in private. "Aren't you going to say something?" Sarah asked one day at lunch, her voice tight with indignation on my behalf. "They're literally erasing you from your own project." I took a deliberate sip from my thermos. Sometimes the loudest statement is made by staying silent and letting others reveal themselves. "That's some Zen bullshit, Eliza," she said, but with a hint of admiration. "I'd be raising hell." "Different strategies for different personalities," I replied. "I prefer mine." What Sarah didn't know, what nobody at Grantham knew, was that I wasn't merely accepting my fate. I was executing a carefully orchestrated plan that had begun the moment Victor had first looked at my work with that particular gleam in his eye, the look of someone seeing not innovation, but opportunity. In my apartment each night, I refined what would become Sentinel, an evolution of my original system, rebuilt from scratch with superior architecture and expanded capabilities, where OmniChain could adapt to changing conditions. Sentinel could predict them before they materialized. Where OmniChain required manual optimization, Sentinel learned continuously, growing more efficient with each passing day. The beauty of it was in the code itself, elegant, clean, completely new, but unmistakably derived from the same design philosophy that made OmniChain valuable. Anyone with technical expertise would see the relationship immediately and recognize which came first. I maintained meticulous documentation of every development stage, backed up across multiple secure servers. I engaged an independent code auditor to verify timestamps and development progression. I filed additional patents that expanded on my original work, creating an airtight legal framework around my intellectual property, all while continuing to arrive at Grantham Logic each morning, thermos in hand, quiet and observant as the company prepared for their big product launch. The summons to Victor's office came exactly 1 week before the scheduled OmniChain public unveiling. His assistant's voice on the phone carried a note of practiced sympathy that told me everything I needed to know before I even entered his glass-walled corner office. "Eliza, thank you for coming in," Victor said. Not bothering to stand as I entered, he gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, have a seat." I sat, placing my thermos on the edge of his desk. The office was minimalist, all clean lines and neutral tones, with a sweeping view of the city, the kind of space designed to intimidate through understated wealth. "I'll get right to the point," he continued, folding his hands. "Grantham Logic is making some strategic adjustments to our team structure. We're refocusing our resources on forward-thinking innovation." I waited, saying nothing. My silence seemed to unsettle him. He cleared his throat. "Unfortunately, your position is among those we're eliminating." "I see," I said, my voice neutral. "This isn't a reflection on your technical abilities," Victor added quickly. "You're clearly a competent engineer, but Grantham needs visionaries right now, people who can see beyond conventional approaches." He pushed a folder across the desk. "We're offering a fair severance package, including 3 months' salary and extended health benefits." I picked up the folder without opening it. "Is there anything else?" He blinked, clearly expecting more resistance, perhaps tears or anger. "Just that we'll need you to sign the standard non-compete and confidentiality agreements. They're included in the packet." I smiled then, the first genuine expression I'd shown him. "I'll have my lawyer review these." "Of course," he said, regaining his composure. "We'd like to finalize everything by the end of the week. And Eliza," he leaned forward slightly, "I hope there are no hard feelings. Sometimes people just aren't the right fit for a company's vision." I stood, gathering my thermos and the folder. "No hard feelings at all. Victor, I think things will work out exactly as they should." As I left his office, I heard him already on the phone, his voice carrying a note of relief. I cleared out my desk methodically, packing my few personal items into a small box. Several colleagues stopped by, expressing surprise and offering condolences. "What will you do now?" Sarah asked, helping me pack. "I have some options to explore," I said. "Don't worry about me." She lowered her voice. "This is about OmniChain, isn't it? They're cutting you out completely before the launch." I just smiled. "Time will tell." That evening, I sent a single email from my personal account to Miles Cavendish, the Chief Technology Officer at Coretrix Systems, Grantham Logic's largest competitor in the supply chain solutions space. The subject line read simply, "Mutual opportunity of interest." His response came within 20 minutes. "Intrigued. Coffee tomorrow." The next morning, instead of my usual route to Grantham Logic, I drove to a small, upscale cafe in a neighboring city. Miles was already there, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him a scholarly appearance. "Ms. Hartley," he said, standing to greet me. "I've followed your publications on machine learning applications. Impressive work." "Thank you," I replied, taking a seat across from him. "I appreciate you meeting on short notice." "Your email was cryptic but compelling," he smiled. Though I must say, I was surprised to hear from a Grantham employee. "Former employee," I corrected, "as of yesterday." His eyebrows rose. "I see. That explains some things." He leaned forward. "What's this opportunity you mentioned?" I placed my laptop on the table between us. "I'd like to show you something first, if you don't mind signing this." I slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table. Just standard protection. Miles reviewed the document carefully before signing. Fair enough. I opened my laptop and turned it toward him. This is Sentinel. For the next 30 minutes, I walked him through my creation. I showed him the architecture, the performance metrics, the adaptive learning capabilities that far outstripped anything currently on the market, including what Grantham was about to launch. I demonstrated a simulation comparing Sentinel to current industry solutions, showing how it reduced supply chain disruptions by 78% while increasing efficiency by 42%. Miles's professional demeanor cracked as the demonstration progressed. By the end, he was leaning forward, eyes wide, asking increasingly technical questions that revealed his genuine excitement. "This is remarkable," he finally said, sitting back. "And you developed this independently?" "I did," I replied, "through my company, Cairo Dynamics. You own the full intellectual property rights." I nodded, complete with patents filed 6 months ago. He took off his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully. "And Grantham is preparing to launch a product that bears striking similarities to my earlier work," I said carefully. "But Sentinel represents a significant evolution beyond that foundation." Miles put his glasses back on, studying me with newfound interest. "Ms. Hartley, why come to Coratrix with technology like this? You could start your own company, seek venture funding." "I could," I agreed, "but scaling requires resources, market presence, and established customer relationships, all things Coratrix already has. I'm an engineer, not an entrepreneur. I prefer building systems to building companies." "What exactly are you proposing?" "An exclusive perpetual licensing agreement," I said. "Cairo Dynamics retains the intellectual property. Coratrix gets exclusive rights to implement and market Sentinel. I provide consultation during integration and future development as a part-time advisor." "And your terms?" I named a figure that made his eyebrows rise again, substantial, but not outrageous given the technology's value. "That's ambitious," he said carefully. "It's less than what you'd spend on R&D to catch up to where Sentinel already is," I replied, "and significantly less than the market advantage it will provide." Miles was silent for a long moment, fingers tapping thoughtfully on the table. "I'll need my technical team to verify your claims." "Of course," I said. "I've prepared a demonstration environment they can access. And I'd need board approval for an agreement of this magnitude." "I understand," I said, closing my laptop. "I should mention that I'm exploring multiple options. While I came to Coratrix first due to your company's reputation, I can't guarantee exclusivity in discussions indefinitely." It was a gentle pressure tactic, but effective. Miles nodded. "Let me arrange a technical review immediately. If things check out, I can convene a special board meeting within 48 hours. We shook hands, and I left the cafe feeling the first spark of satisfaction since watching Victor present my work as his own. The game was in motion. The technical review went exactly as I expected. Coratrix's team spent 6 hours rigorously testing Sentinel, pushing it to its limits, comparing it against their existing systems. Their conclusion, delivered directly to Miles in my presence, was unequivocal. This is at least 2 years ahead of anything else in the market. The board meeting followed the next day, conducted via secure video conference. I presented Sentinel myself, answered their pointed questions about performance guarantees and implementation requirements, and outlined the licensing structure. 2 hours later, we had a signed agreement. Phase 1, complete. The following morning, as Victor Lane was likely rehearsing his presentation for the Omni-Chain launch, a courier delivered a certified letter to Grantham Logic's legal department. The letter, from the prestigious technology law firm Barnes & Winterstein, acting on behalf of Cairo Dynamics LLC, detailed extensive patent infringement concerns regarding the soon-to-be-launched Omni-Chain system. Attached were copies of my patent filings, development logs, and technical documentation demonstrating clear precedents. The letter requested an immediate cessation of all development, marketing, and deployment activities related to Omni-Chain pending resolution of these intellectual property concerns. A similar package was simultaneously delivered to Grantham's 5 largest investors. I didn't need to be present to imagine the chaos unfolding in those glass-walled offices. Within hours, Grantham's stock dropped 11% as the news spread through industry channels. By afternoon, technology blogs were running headlines questioning the originality of the company's revolutionary new product. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. "This is Victor. We need to talk, please." I didn't respond. A second message followed. "Whatever you want, name your price." Still, I said nothing. The next day, while Grantham's leadership scrambled to contain the damage, I accompanied Miles to Coratrix's headquarters to begin integration planning for Sentinel. The team that greeted me was respectful, curious, and eager to learn, a stark contrast to the environment I'd left behind. "We're announcing the Sentinel partnership at next week's Tech Fusion conference," Miles informed me as we toured the facility. "We'd like you to present it personally." "I'm not particularly comfortable with public speaking," I admitted. "Consider it part of your consulting role," he said with a smile. "Besides, the technical community should know who really created this breakthrough." 1 week later, I stood on the Tech Fusion main stage, thermos in hand for comfort, as Miles introduced me to a packed auditorium. "Today, Coratrix is proud to introduce both a revolutionary technology and its brilliant creator," he announced. "Please welcome Eliza Hartley, the architect of Sentinel." The presentation I gave was purely technical, no mentions of Grantham, no hints of corporate drama, just a straightforward explanation of what Sentinel could do and how it worked. I let the technology speak for itself. The response was overwhelming. Industry analysts immediately recognized the implications, with one prominent consultant tweeting, "Sentinel just made every other supply chain AI obsolete overnight. Game-changing doesn't begin to describe it." As I stepped off stage, my phone buzzed with another message from Victor. "This isn't over. Our lawyers will fight this." "For the first time," I replied, "the patents are valid. The documentation is clear. You have no case." His response came quickly. "You developed this while working for us. It belongs to Grantham." Sentinel was developed independently through Cairo Dynamics, with no Grantham resources, I wrote back. "But you're welcome to try proving otherwise in court. The discovery process should be illuminating." He didn't respond again. Over the next week, Grantham Logic's stock plummeted an additional 23%. 3 vice presidents resigned. Dozens of employees updated their LinkedIn profiles and began quietly reaching out to Coratrix about potential opportunities. The omni-chain launch was officially postponed indefinitely pending internal review. I watched it all unfold from my new consulting office at Coratrix, where I was helping their engineers implement Sentinel across their client base. The system performed even better in real-world applications than in testing, generating enthusiastic client testimonials that further fueled Coratrix's rising market position. 4 weeks after my dismissal from Grantham, I received an unexpected email from a name I didn't recognize, Grace Mallory. The subject line read, "New CEO of Grantham Logic request to meet." I did my research before responding. Grace had an impressive resume, 20 years in technology leadership, respected for both her technical knowledge and ethical business practices. She had been brought in by Grantham's board specifically to handle the crisis. We arranged to meet at the same cafe where I'd first shown Sentinel to Miles. Grace arrived precisely on time, a tall woman with close-cropped silver hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. "Thank you for agreeing to see me, Ms. Hartley," she said, extending her hand. "I appreciate it, given the circumstances." "I was curious," I admitted, shaking her hand. "And please, call me Eliza." "Eliza, then." She settled into the chair across from me. "I'll be direct. Victor Lane has been removed as CEO. The board has asked me to salvage what can be salvaged." "Congratulations on the new position," I said neutrally. "Thank you. Though it's rather like being named captain of a ship that's already hit the iceberg." She smiled wryly. "I've reviewed everything, the patents, the documentation, the code bases. You built OmniChain, and then you built something better." I nodded, waiting. "I'm not here to negotiate ownership or try to invalidate your patents," she continued. "What happened to you at Grantham was inexcusable. I wanted to meet personally to apologize on behalf of the company, even though the responsibility lies primarily with individuals who are no longer with us." The apology surprised me. "I appreciate that. I'm also here to discuss possibilities for the future," Grace said. "Grantham is wounded but not dead. We have client relationships, market presence, and infrastructure that took years to build. And now you need a product, I observed. Exactly, she leaned forward. I understand you have an exclusive agreement with Coratrix. I'm not asking you to break that, but I am wondering if there might be room for a limited partnership, perhaps a non-exclusive implementation license for specific market segments where Coratrix doesn't have a strong presence. I considered her proposal. That would require Coratrix's agreement as well. Of course, I've already had preliminary discussions with Miles. He suggested that if you were amenable, a three-way meeting could be productive. The strategist in me saw the potential immediately. Coratrix couldn't cover the entire market overnight, regardless of how superior their technology was. Allowing Grantham-controlled access to Sentinel would accelerate adoption while positioning Dynamics, my company, as the true innovator behind both competitors. I'd be open to discussing possibilities, I said carefully, with certain conditions regarding proper attribution and transparent development practices. Grace nodded. I wouldn't expect anything less. The three-way partnership negotiations took 2 weeks of intense discussion. The final agreement allowed Grantham to license a limited version of Sentinel for specific industry verticals where they had established relationships, with Coratrix maintaining exclusivity in the broader market. All implementations would clearly credit Dynamics as the technology creator, with my role as chief architect prominently acknowledged. Most satisfying was the governance structure, a joint technical steering committee that I would chair, giving me effective control over how my technology would evolve across both companies. 6 months after being dismissed for lacking vision, I sat at the head of a conference table in Coratrix's headquarters, presiding over the first quarterly review of the Sentinel implementation. Around the table were senior engineers from both Coratrix and Grantham, with Miles and Grace participating as executive sponsors. My name was displayed prominently on the digital agenda on the wall screen: Eliza Hartley, Chief Architect, Dynamics. As I listened to the implementation reports, all overwhelmingly positive, I allowed myself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Sentinel had become the new standard in AI-driven supply chain management, with case studies already showing unprecedented efficiency improvements across multiple industries. Grace reported that Grantham's stock had stabilized and begun to recover under the new partnership arrangement. Coratrix had expanded into 3 new international markets on the strength of Sentinel's capabilities. And Dynamics, my one-person company that now employed 3 patent attorneys and a contract negotiator, was receiving inquiries about potential applications in adjacent industries. Victor Lane had resurfaced as a creative consultant for a small startup, his carefully curated social media presenting him as a visionary, taking time to mentor the next generation. The irony wasn't lost on me. After the meeting, as everyone filed out, Sarah Chen, who had joined Coratrix during the exodus from Grantham, lingered behind. You never raised your voice, she said with a touch of wonder. Never sent angry emails, never made public accusations. You just built something better and let the truth speak for itself. I smiled, picking up my trusty thermos. Sometimes the most effective response isn't a reaction at all, but a creation. Still zen as ever, she laughed. But I have to admit, your way worked beautifully. As we walked out together, Sarah asked, do you ever regret not starting your own company? You could have been CEO instead of just an advisor to 2 companies. I considered the question. I'm an engineer. Sarah, I like building systems, not managing people. This arrangement gives me the freedom to focus on what I do best, while others handle what they do best. And the satisfaction of watching Victor's downfall, she pressed with a knowing smile. That was never the goal, I replied honestly. Just an inevitable consequence of the truth coming to light. But as I drove home that evening, I allowed myself to acknowledge the deep sense of rightness I felt, not triumph over Victor's fall, but vindication of my own worth. My name was now permanently attached to my creation. My contributions were recognized and valued. My vision, the one Victor claimed I lacked, was reshaping an entire industry. I had never needed to shout to be heard. I had simply needed to build something undeniable. Some lessons in corporate politics are learned through painful experience. Some people need to assert their value through confrontation and demand recognition. My approach had always been different, quieter, more strategic, ultimately more devastating to those who underestimated me. In my apartment that night, I opened my laptop and began sketching the architecture for Sentinel's next evolution. There were still problems to solve, efficiencies to find, innovations to pursue. The work continued, just as it always had. But now, when I typed my name in the creator field of the documentation, I did so with the certainty that this time, no one would dare remove it. 6 months became a year, then 2. Sentinel evolved through 3 major iterations, each more sophisticated than the last. My partnership with Coratrix and Grantham expanded into a complex ecosystem of implementations across diverse industries, from healthcare supply logistics to global food distribution networks. Grace Mallory proved to be everything Victor wasn't: technically astute, ethically grounded, and scrupulous about giving credit where it was due. Under her leadership, Grantham rebuilt its reputation, though always in Coratrix's shadow when it came to Sentinel implementations. Miles Cavendish became a close professional ally, respecting my technical autonomy while providing the corporate infrastructure needed to scale Sentinel globally. The arrangement worked perfectly. I invented, Coratrix implemented, and together we transformed how supply chains functioned worldwide. Cairo Dynamics grew from my one-person operation to a specialized research entity with 15 engineers working on next-generation systems. I maintained majority ownership, but brought in key technical talent as equity partners, creating a flat organizational structure focused entirely on innovation. I still kept my thermos, though some habits become talismans. The definitive vindication came during the World Economic Forum in Davos, where I reluctantly agreed to participate in a panel on AI-driven economic resilience. As I walked onto the stage, I spotted Victor Lane in the audience, no longer the confident CEO, but a middle management consultant trying to rebuild his reputation. Our eyes met briefly. He looked away first. I didn't mention him during my presentation, didn't reference the past at all. I simply explained the technical principles behind Sentinel's success and outlined my vision for future development. The system's results spoke for themselves. Supply chain disruptions reduced by 81% across implemented networks, efficiency improvements averaging 53%, sustainability metrics showing 44% reduced waste. Afterward, several journalists approached me for interviews, all asking variations of the same question: how does it feel to have created technology that's reshaping global commerce? My answer was consistent. It feels like the natural outcome of focusing on the work itself rather than who gets credit for it. The irony wasn't lost on me. Late that evening, as I sat alone in the hotel bar reviewing technical specifications for Sentinel 4.0, a server delivered a glass of expensive scotch to my table. "From the gentleman at the corner," she explained. Victor Lane sat alone, raising his own glass in a subtle toast when I looked over. After a moment's consideration, I picked up the drink and walked to his table. "May I?" "Please," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Up close, he looked older, the confidence in his expression replaced by a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Congratulations on your success," he offered. "Well deserved." "Thank you," I replied, taking a small sip of the scotch. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. "I underestimated you," he finally said, his voice low. "Misjudged entirely." I didn't respond immediately, watching him over the rim of my glass. "Yes," I said at last. "You did. For what it's worth, I've learned from it." He attempted a self-deprecating smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Expensive lesson. Most valuable ones are..." He leaned forward slightly. "If you don't mind my asking, was it always your plan to let me take the fall that way?" I considered the question carefully. My plan was to protect my work and ensure it reached its potential. Everything else was simply consequence. "Elegant," he admitted. "No direct confrontation, no messy accusations, just superior execution and letting reality do the rest." He shook his head with reluctant admiration. "I would have gone straight to the press, made it personal." "Different strategies for different personalities," I said, echoing what I'd told Sarah years earlier. "I've been offered a CEO position again," he said, changing the subject. "Smaller company, but solid potential, supply chain adjacent. Actually," he hesitated, "I've been telling them we should explore Sentinel integration." I understood the implicit question. The licensing process goes through Coratrix or Grantham now, depending on the industry vertical. All applications are reviewed by the Technical Steering Committee. Which you chair, he noted. Yes. He nodded slowly. Accepting the message beneath my neutral response, any proposal would be evaluated on its technical merits, without personal bias, but also without special consideration. Fair enough, he said, finishing his drink. I should let you get back to your work. He stood, extending his hand. No hard feelings. I recalled him saying those exact words to me in his office the day he fired me. The symmetry was perfect. I stood as well, shaking his hand briefly. No hard feelings, Victor. I wish you success. As he walked away, I felt no triumph, no vindictive satisfaction, just the closing of a chapter. Victor Lane had become irrelevant to my story, a footnote rather than the antagonist. I returned to my table, set aside the untouched scotch, and opened my thermos of green tea. The technical specifications for Sentinel 4.0 still needed refinement. The work continued, as it always would. In the reflection on my laptop screen, I caught a glimpse of myself and realized I was smiling, not at Victor's diminishment, but at my own journey from the quiet engineer whose contributions could be erased to the acknowledged architect of a technology changing the world. I had never needed to be loud to be powerful. I had simply needed to be right, and patient enough to let the truth emerge in its own time. The greatest revenge, I had discovered, wasn't watching someone else fall. It was rising so far beyond them that they became irrelevant to your story. I took a sip of my tea and began typing. 3 years after that night in Davos, I stood on a different stage, accepting the Turing Award for contributions to artificial intelligence. Sentinel had evolved beyond supply chain management into a framework for complex adaptive systems across multiple domains, from climate modeling to pandemic response coordination. My acceptance speech was brief, technical, and focused on the work yet to be done, rather than accomplishments already achieved. I thanked my team at Cairo, acknowledged the implementation partnerships with Coratrix and Grantham, and dedicated the award to everyone who had ever felt invisible in the shadow of louder voices. Sarah Chen, now Coratrix's Chief Product Officer, hosted the celebration dinner afterward. "You've come full circle," she told me, clinking her glass against my ever-present thermos. "From having your name erased to having it etched in computing history." I smiled. The work was always what mattered most. "Says the woman with the multi-million-dollar licensing empire," she teased. "A fortunate side effect," I replied, though I won't pretend it isn't satisfying. Grace Mallory joined our conversation, elegant in her formal attire. Grantham Logic had stabilized under her leadership, finding a sustainable niche implementing Sentinel for healthcare logistics. "I heard Victor's company filed for bankruptcy last quarter," she mentioned casually. "I hadn't heard," I said, and it was true. I'd stopped tracking his career years ago. "Tried to develop a competing system," Grace explained. "Couldn't match Sentinel's capabilities. The market has no patience for second best in this space anymore." "The technology sets a high bar," I acknowledged. "The architect sets a high bar," Grace corrected. "Speaking of which, the Joint Steering Committee needs your guidance on the adaptive learning parameters for the 5.0 release. The Grantham team has concerns about the recursion depth." Just like that, the conversation returned to the work, the elegant complexity of the systems, the challenging problems still to be solved, the potential yet to be realized, where it belonged. Later that evening, I stood alone on the hotel balcony, watching the city lights and reflecting on the journey. From the quiet engineer whose work was appropriated to the acknowledged pioneer whose vision had reshaped multiple industries. My phone buzzed with a notification, a message from one of my researchers about a promising breakthrough in the self-correction algorithms we'd been refining. I smiled, typing a quick response encouraging them to pursue the lead. The work continued. It always would. That was the true victory, not the awards, or the recognition, or the financial success, but the freedom to pursue the problems that fascinated me, surrounded by people who valued both the solutions and their creator. I thought briefly of Victor Lane, not with anger or resentment, but with a detached sort of gratitude. His attempt to erase me had instead propelled me toward creating something far beyond what would have been possible within Grantham's constraints. Sometimes the worst moments in our professional lives become unexpected catalysts for our greatest achievements. Sometimes being underestimated is the perfect opportunity to demonstrate just how wrong others can be. And sometimes, the quiet ones who observe everything are the most dangerous when crossed, not because they seek revenge, but because they have the patience and vision to build something better. I went back inside to join my colleagues, my thermos in hand. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new problems to solve, new systems to architect. I was ready. After all, I had never lacked vision. I had simply been waiting for the right moment to reveal it. 5 years after receiving the Turing Award, I found myself at another crossroads. Sentinel had become the foundation for a new generation of adaptive AI systems. Its architecture studied in university courses, and its implementations spanning every major industry. Cairo Dynamics had grown into a respected research institute with over 100 engineers working across multiple specializations. My role had evolved from hands-on architect to strategic visionary, guiding the overall direction while nurturing younger talents who brought fresh perspectives to the technology. It was a comfortable position, financially secure and professionally respected. But something was missing. I realized it during a routine quarterly review with the Coratrix and Grantham implementation teams. As they presented the latest deployment metrics, all impressive, all validating the technology's value, I found my mind wandering to problems beyond supply chain optimization and resource allocation. Climate systems, socioeconomic dynamics, public health response networks, the truly complex, interconnected challenges that defied conventional solutions. Eliza, Miles Cavendish's voice broke through my thoughts. You seem distant today. Just thinking about next steps, I replied. For Sentinel 6.0, he asked. The roadmap looks solid to me. I shook my head slightly. Beyond Sentinel, beyond supply chains. The meeting continued, but afterward, Miles pulled me aside. In the decade since our first cafe meeting, he had become not just a business partner but a trusted friend. You're restless, he observed. I recognize the signs. I nodded. Sentinel has exceeded every expectation. The implementation partnerships work seamlessly. The technology continues to evolve. But you're ready for a new challenge, he finished for me. Something bigger. Something different, I corrected. Something with broader impact. Miles studied me for a moment. Cairo's research division could pivot. You have the resources, the talent, the reputation. It's not just about redirecting resources, I explained. It's about finding the right problem, one that matters in a different way. 2 weeks later, the answer came from an unexpected source. A former graduate student of mine, now working with an international climate research consortium, reached out about applying Sentinel's adaptive modeling capabilities to climate intervention strategies. The models we have are sophisticated at prediction, she explained during our video call. But weak on intervention optimization, we can forecast outcomes, but we struggle to identify the most efficient points of intervention in such a complex system. As she outlined the challenge, something clicked into place. The same architectural principles that allowed Sentinel to navigate supply chain disruptions could be applied to climate stabilization efforts, but the stakes were immeasurably higher. The variables vastly more numerous, the time horizons much longer. Send me everything you have, I told her. I want to understand the current approaches. For the next month, I immersed myself in climate science literature, consulting with experts, examining existing models. I worked alone initially, sketching architectural concepts late into the night, just as I had done with the original Sentinel system years before. When I finally emerged with a preliminary framework, I called a meeting with Cairo's senior research team. I'm proposing a new initiative, I told them, displaying the architectural diagrams on the wall screen. We're calling it Gaia. The team listened intently as I outlined the concept, an adaptive system that would model climate interventions not as isolated actions, but as orchestrated patterns, optimizing for cascading effects across interconnected ecosystems. The mathematics were daunting, the computational requirements enormous, but the potential impact was undeniable. This is ambitious, said Dr. Wei Chen, our head of research. We'd need to develop entirely new approaches to temporal modeling. And the data integration challenges are substantial, added Dr. Lena Okafor. We'd be drawing from thousands of disparate sources with varying reliability. I nodded, which is precisely why it's worth pursuing. The technical challenges alone will advance our field, regardless of the outcome. And the business model, asked our CFO, always practical. Open source, I replied, which caused several surprised looks. This isn't about licensing revenue. If it works, it needs to be accessible to every government, every research institution, every climate initiative globally. The discussion continued for hours, dissecting technical approaches, resource requirements,